Should we talk about the next story?
All right, let's move on. Shall we talk about this? This is the Sunday Telegraph, page 21. This is about the ongoing conflict, isn't it? Tell us more.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up a story on Israel because I've spent a lot of time there over the last few months, and the only story that I could find looking through the papers very quickly was a piece, an opinion piece by Jake Wallace-Simons. And he specifically asks about a psychological phenomenon. And he goes on to talk about the credibility of news networks, the credibility of those on the ground who are saying all sorts of crazy figures.
Which was the question I asked you, which was, right, you know, what we're being fed, is it accurate?
And he is quoting, and it's a fairly long piece over here, but he's quoting experts. Always go to the experts when you want to get the facts. People talk about facts and they talk about numbers, and now people are not even, a lot of news networks today are not even saying Hamas-controlled figures or the Hamas Health Ministry. They're actually just coming up with, so I heard somebody this morning say more than 100,000 Palestinians have been killed or injured. Now that's how they're trying to spin it even more. 100,000, wow, killed or injured. And that's not the way to go ahead and do this.
So I'm going to push back on that, because I know news organisations have to reference those figures. I know certainly here...
Well, they're reference to Hamas.
No, so we always will say, according to Hamas, these are the numbers. So to put it into some context...
I monitor a huge amount of media in this country as well, and they're just coming up with these numbers. Now, they could argue...
Is it laziness?
Maybe they would say that it's timing. They're doing the headlines and they just don't have the time because everything is very split-second.
Well, accuracy is everything.
It is everything. And I do find it astounding that Hamas Health Ministry are able to tell us by the minute how many people that have died, but they cannot tell us where the hostages are or how many there are.
Well, because they don't know, because they've sold them on to other different groups.
Yes, but how do they know how many people have died so accurately?
And I get your point, I understand that. And also the other thing is, well, how many Hamas people have been killed? How many Islamic Jihad people have been killed? Many of them, because Israel have been fighting this for almost 6 months' time. Israel's estimates with Islamic Jihad is 16,000. 16,000. So that's pretty much 1-to-1. And that's pretty much what Jake Wallace-Simons says over here. He's quoting experts like John Spencer. Who's John Spencer? The world's foremost authority on urban warfare. That's exactly what's taking place right now in Israel. In Gaza, between the Israelis and the Islamists. Urban warfare, which is the worst type of urban warfare, worst type of fighting you could ever get. Why? Because
civilians
you have Russia and Syria who were bombing Syria itself, and they were. It's estimated that for every one combatant that they kill, which was ISIS, 9 civilians were killed. Now, when it came to Afghanistan and Iraq, the Americans and the British, for every one combatant they killed, it was between 3 to 5 civilians. The estimate over here is for every one combatant killed in Gaza, it's 1 civilian killed. Now, that's tragic. It's terrible. But the reason why it's happening is because, as we've been told many times before, it's Hamas purposely putting them there. Their biggest weapon is not the short-range missiles and the medium-range missiles and the long-range missiles, which they fired hundreds of thousands towards Israel from civilian areas, by the way, inside of Gaza into civilian areas in Israel. And bearing in mind that a third of them drop inside of Gaza itself anyway, that's not their biggest weapon. The biggest weapon is not actually taking more than 250 Israeli hostages, of which 134 are still left today. That's a big weapon, but it's not the biggest weapon is actually to inflate the numbers and do this public relations propaganda thing to convince the entire world that babies are the only ones who are being killed. And this is tragic, especially when you're looking at Sudan.
Well, I was about to come to that. But you're starting to see a change in the international community, the US also putting pressure onto Israel as well. And that is also because we have elections coming up. So all of those Western countries are now deeply nervous about this being prolonged.
Yes, well, firstly, with regard to the US, President Biden and his White House team said that nothing has changed whatsoever. The reason why the Israelis decided, or Benjamin Netanyahu decided, to pull back his team, which was specifically 2 people, Ron Dermer and Tzachi Hanegbi, who were 2 ministers from his government, 2 trusted ministers, and they were going out. And by the way, they were going out at the request of President Biden because he suggested that he's got another idea to go into Rafah. So the reason why Netanyahu actually cancelled that, although they've asked him to go out again, is is simply because that the wording of that United Nations resolution changed. So in other words, it was actually all on Israel. The onus was on Israel to cease fire now, but it wasn't tied in to the release of the 134 hostages.
Indeed. But of course, you then, we have to move on actually, but the ICJ ruling, of course, that was on the 29th of March, saying that they must act without delay to allow aid into Gaza. And those are the pictures that people here are
And I
seeing.
would like to say that Israel are allowing aid into Gaza, 200 lorries a day. They are being stuck at other checkpoints, David, but we are being told it's Israel. It isn't.
We are being told it's Israel.
And the problem is distribution. It's the distribution.
Well, absolutely right. And of course, you know, what we're seeing is the pictures of starving people in Gaza, and so that has enormous resonance with
But
people.
you're also saying there's more than 30 markets over there where they're actually selling food over there.
They're selling food aid, David, off the lorries because Hamas take it, put gunmen on top and drive it away.
No, indeed. I'm afraid on that note, I have to just move on very quickly because I do want to get to your third story before we go